Autumn is a season of celebration, contemplation and reflection. After a carefree and often joyful summer holiday under the cloudless blue sky, we welcome a calm and solar period with open arms. This is the time of the year when we rediscover if our everyday life entails any substantial meaning. Also a perfect timing to engross upon new leisure projects as the cold and dark winter season approaches us with a fast pace. As the autumn sunshine alters the landscape of our beloved Svea realm, we took a 2-day trip to the nearby Strängnäs Principality. The history of this middle-sized town, Mariefred, goes back to the late medieval time, when Sweden was still a Catholic nation. A wealthy aristocrat, who was the consul of the state, Bo Yongson, commissioned the impressive fortress on the south bank of the Mälaren Lake, which is this town's landmark today. Many visitors love to include the stunning building complex when they try to catch their perfect Kodak image. In the heart of this town, there's a huge medieval church with round arched windows and polygon chancel. Initially, the French Roman Catholic Carthusians order commissioned an enclosed cloister. The present-day church was constructed in the middle of the 17th century with the help of a generous donation by the Queen Hedwig Eleonora. This church is really beautiful and stunning, and we are probably the only visitor today. All beautiful ornaments and art has transformed myself to a very different place. But I can't stop asking myself a question. What shall we do with such a gigantic building which has cost so much money many years ago to construct? Nobody seems to pay any attention to it anymore, regardless how beautiful it really is. And is it really wise to just leave it the way it is, or is it important to find new applications? The historical cultural heritage is somehow the backbone of a nation, in which knowledge, virtues, and experiences are the obvious foundation of a country's prosperity and harmony, as well as fuel when recession strikes or warfare breaks up. The monumental architecture is the evidence of its former grandeur. The value of maintaining such huge buildings, which once were used by a religious institution, depends either on the fact that they are very beautiful buildings which have been an important place for the locals in the history, a beacon for the patriotism and the national pride, or a symbol of the Western moral consensus, which still coincide very much with the biblical doctrines. For me, it is a terrible waste, as long as the community does not take any advantage of such monumental buildings other than admiring its elegant silhouette from a distance. Is it possible to use such a building as a concert hall, regarding its brilliant acoustic reverberations, without upsetting the pious congregations or damaging the original decorations? Or can we see such building as a public meeting place again for people who feel lonely in the secular era without adding any religious values? I'm standing in front of the Shanna Parish Church, which was constructed already during the 12th century. And it was a rather dramatic period. The Viking paganism had disappeared without any chance to survive, and the Christianity was finally the most important religion in Sweden. And this church was built in this area to commemorate the Christianity, which people thought had brought a lot of important wealth and knowledge to this area. And at the end of the 16th century, this church was abandoned and left in despair, and many important and valuable liturgic items has been stolen by the local people, and some of them have of course moved away to other churches in this region. According to the archaeological examinations, the first inhabitants migrated to this region from the contemporary Östergötland and Närke provinces during the early Stone Age. A number of Stone Age settlements have found in the nearby region, in which tools such as stone axe and flint knives were uncovered. During the Viking era, the place name Strängnäs, which consists two separate words in the Old Norse, sträng meaning string and ness meaning headland, was used. The brave and skillful Viking warriors left a few quite impressive runestones in this region, most of which are still very well preserved today. On our way from Mariafred to the central town Strängnäs, we made a quick stop at an old grape field which is dated back to the 11th century. This is Elsa's burial field, and this burial field contains 250 graves, and according to the archaeological examination, this burial field was used during the Iron Age, and many of the patterns which are engraved on the stones are impossible to interpret today. And it was a time when the Nordic mythology was regarded as the truth. So this surrounding is really very tranquil and beautiful. I can understand how come people during the Iron Age choose this place as a burial field. The heroic Viking legacies never cease to fascinate people around the world, and the special pagan culture still has a profound impact on the Scandinavian way of living to the present days. Even though the Christian doctrines were glorified in the past by various different congregations, and its influence upon the moralities and ethic had surpassed the Old Norse pagan religion through the recent history, the rustic and undisguised Viking mentality is still very much alive. The paganistic holiday, such as the midsummer celebration, is the most important summer party. In the urban area, people who often wear the traditional flower garlands are gathered in big parks and dancing around the maypole. In this particular region, Stalaholmen, a Viking festival is celebrated every July, which features among others Viking-styled entertainment, the craftsmen, the theatre plays, and the games. During the 19th century, this area enjoyed a remarkable industrialization. More and more locals were relocated from the traditional agriculture to big-scale industry. The iron ore from the nearby mines were often of very high quality. The massive pine forest provided the charcoal, which are used to smelt down the iron ore. Many huge skilled factories emerged on this fertile soil. As Sweden enters the globalization age and the environmental restrictions were sharpened, many factories relocated to other territories. Simple jobs, which require very little skill, disappears. And such a change creates a huge challenge for the democratic society. Can ordinary voters who understand very little of the beautiful terms economists use to explain their strategies make an adequate decisions on the elections? If you just look at the building complex, it is impossible to guess this was once a very much appreciated industrial building complex, and today we have a lot of different small and wonderful shops here. We have a wonderful bakery, and this is the auction house where people are selling items which are valuable, or at least a fashionable value, are very high to people. And inside this building there's actually this Regents gymnastic hall. Very lovely small boys and girls are trained to be probably Olympic gymnasts in the future. Like many other Swedish middle-sized towns, the demographic chart of Strängnäs Principality is not really in balance. Young and ambitious people who want to have an academic education in order to have a well-paid position later move away to big cities such as Stockholm, Uppsala, Linköping, or Gothenburg. There are very few working positions which are available for young working force, which are not interested in earning academic credits or learning practical skills such as nursing, plumbing, or carpentry. Can the contemporary welfare budget afford such a generous system forever, or does the society must rethink how to cope with the coming global recessions confidently and protect the emblematic Swedish medical care system in a time when more and more people die in a very old age? An even more important question is, to what extent does the nationalistic political movement intervene the policy-making process in the near future? This spot is the most windy place in the whole town, and this windmill was constructed already during the 17th century, and this modern look of it was constructed in the middle of the 19th century, and this is probably the landmark of the town. Regardless where you are, you could see this windmill from everywhere in this beautiful town, and especially in the autumn period and in the autumn time, the change of the colors all sides the windows must be the very best decoration of this beautiful place. I really love this town. The Armored Infantry Regiment established in Strängnäs during the intermediate period between the First and the Second World War. The Kingdom Sweden was located between two dangerous nations, the Soviet Union and the Nazi Germany. Although there are some pro-Hitler and pro-nationalist voices in Sweden in the 30s, most people were probably very afraid of the prospect of being invaded by either of above-mentioned superpowers. Back then, the Russian soldiers were called the Wild Ivans, and the German soldiers were called the Bloodthirsty Freeds. Their images were the most hostile illustrations which most people did not want to think about. When the Germans invaded Denmark and Norway, Sweden went into a collective panic. From the newspaper, they saw how unprecedented effective combating vehicles destroyed the beautiful ancient cities to ruins. From the radio, they heard the devastating lament of the refugees who had to go away from their homes. Nobody really felt safe as long as the cruel war continued upon the European continent. A huge amount of tax money were poured into the defense industry. Military vehicles and fighters were purchased. Many domestic defense industries established and supplied the Swedish military with high-quality equipment. The garrison was used until 2006, 15 years after the Soviet Union evaporated and the Cold War went to grave. Today, the old garrison area hosts the largest military vehicle museum in Scandinavia. This place is probably many young boys' paradise, in which they could climb up to many huge vehicles they have only seen on telly before. Do you know how well those tanks could penetrate any items? Just look at this. I mean, the thickness of this steel plate is at least 10 centimeters. It's really thick. And look at the holes. There's no problem for other vehicles to penetrate such a thick steel plate. I mean, just imagine the elasticity module of such a steel is over 250 gigapascal, and it is really powerful. It really teaches us a lesson. We must have respect for all new military equipment, and we must try to defend ourselves from all capricious and craziest people who really want their power much more than anything else. They don't have rational thinking at all. Just look at what happened. It could happen to you tomorrow if another whimsical leader will have the power, will have the same ability to influence the world as Adolf Hitler once had. It's a scary thought, isn't it? What is the evilness? Are we immune or being influenced by all kinds of crazy and notorious ideas, which we dismay deep down in the heart when the crowd applies with both pride and excitement? Is the obvious weakness of the democratic system the reason that a new round of Holocaust will take place again somewhere in the world? When I looked at the huge military vehicles and thought of how easy it is to wipe out a town which took many hundred years to construct, my brain went wild. The human history is somehow the history of warfare and physical struggle. The only certainty is the fact that the next world war could annihilate the entire human race. This lovely cottage was once the resident house of a soldier, and his name was called Gustav Dahl, and here's a picture of him together with his very lovely wife. To be a soldier in the olden time was not a very romantic profession. Many people died during the wartime, not because of the killing or the executions, rather because of the famine and all terrible diseases which just circulate around in any crowds. And it was not easy to find any way to survive in the wartime. Many soldiers had to go away when their wife took care of the most chores back home, took care of the old parents, and take care of course also took care of the small children. And of course they all hope that their husband soldier will be able to come home alive. Life is such a fragile gift. As this short road trip went to its end, we became solemnly wistful as the scenes outside the car windows changed. every trip has its own enlightenment, which give us new questions to think about. Being confronted by demanding thoughts, such as the contradiction between the evil and the kindness, or the relation between a member and a group, we got the incentive of reformulating the idea of who we want to be in the future.